Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy. Today I'll be talking about Dune Spice Wars, the up-and-coming RTS game by Shiro Games, set in the Dune universe. Now, I know I am very late to doing this. This got announced back in December. But the reason why I'm doing this video now is to talk about Shiro Games, what they've done, and their thought process going into Dune. So recently, I have been playing a game called Northgard, which is one of the games they made, and kind of getting a feel for what they are about and all that. But I want to go over the main website for the Dune stuff. I want to go over the Q&A that they did on Discord, and talk a bit about Northgard, and then kind of get some final thoughts on what I hope to see from this game. So, if you don't remember, the old Dune games were made by Westwood Studios, then taken over by EA. Part of EA, I can't remember which one it was, one of their studios. But the old Dune games were RTS games that were very well loved, very much based on Command & Conquer as well. But Dune 2 specifically is heralded as the grandfather and sort of laid the groundwork for RTS games. So, these guys have got a lot on their shoulders to do. But, a couple of things I wanted to look at. I kind of wanted to look at the game itself on here, and we're not going to watch the trailers, but see what they're doing. So Dune Spice Wars is a real-time strategy game with 4X elements. That's already an interesting statement to make. The game's going to be real-time, but I assume the 4X elements are about expanding, exterminating, extracting, and whatever the other thing is. Basically kind of like Civilization-esque mechanics, but in real-time. For the developers of the critically acclaimed Northgard, set in Frank Herbert's groundbreaking Dune universe, you must lead your faction and battle for control and dominance over the harsh desert planet of Arrakis. Spice is the most valuable resource in the universe. The spice extends life, it expands consciousness, and makes interstellar travel possible. Create your own story, play as several factions, including House Atreides and House Harkonnen, and compete for power, own Dune and Spice. Right, I want to look at some pictures, because I think the game looks kind of interesting. So they've done a good job of showing off the different... Like, graphically, this game looks quite nice, considering they've gone for a slightly cartoony look. But the colours they're using in this is awesome. I'm assuming this is like a main base. And here we get to see some units. Now, the combat is probably my biggest worry, but I will get onto that much later on. What we have here, we've got like sandstorms, we've got the desert, we've got like cities. I'm assuming these are like outposts. I'm assuming this is like a main headquarters, and then you take places with like outposts. Different types of units down here. Not sure what they are. It looks like these guys have got shields on. It looks like they might have swords or some kind of batons, and these guys look like they got miniguns or something. Very curious in lore as to what these are, and whether those are like... You do get las guns, and they do have like Chris knives and all sorts of kind of stuff in lore. But it's going to be interesting to see what they're actually fighting with, and if it's primarily melee combat, if there is much range combat. And I'm assuming this thing here, where the pointer is an ornithopter. Not sure. These guys might be harvesters, but I'd be very surprised if they're harvesters. Unless what they're carrying is the harvester, and that's a carriel. Another picture sort of above it with the men around it, and the areas there. And then you get a bit of diplomacy here. We got a bit of the UI. It looks like we've got different resources at the top. I think the most left one there is spice. Not sure what that is. That looks like population. Not sure what that is. That looks like water. That's probably diplomacy, and that is. Now, this is something I'm a little bit worried about, is they are using very similar mechanics from Northgard, and I'm going to bring in that game up a lot because clearly some of that stuff's based on it. And they're going for this mechanic of you have plus and minus to your resources. While it's got plus, you gain that stuff. While it's minus, you're losing it. Hence, you can see up here. I will have to see whether that's what I want in this game, because generally in the old Dune games you have power and you have spice, and it's just a bank. You have X amount of spice, you use it, you gain it. Power, you use it and you gain it. Whether having this many resources, this is going to be interesting, because I'm not against... I have to accept that this game is by a different developer, but I hope that this resource management doesn't get in the way of the actual enjoyment of the game. So we shall see. But this gives us a nice look. Oh yeah, here we go. That is an ornithopter. There's a harvester, and there's military units. So you can definitely click from it. Having now played Northgard, I can see so many similarities with this. It's really interesting. And that there is probably Fame. One up there. Yeah, we have your whole spying and stuff. And by the way, this screen is showing different like Landsrad and like doing different things within the Landsrad to get votes, essentially. So you're going to have diplomatic policies and shit like that by the looks of it, and that's going to be resolutions and putting things in place and messing with other people. There's another look at an ornithopter. Interesting design. That's not quite how I imagine them to look like, but at least they've got the flapping wings. They look a bit more like normal from this angle. This is showing off counterintelligence. This is something they're looking at doing as well, is by putting in spying and adding people on spying on different places. And I imagine you can gain... It looks like you got like political bribes, sabotage, steal weapons. It looks like some really cool ideas, which I think really fits for this type of game, because that's what Dune's known for, really, in game, is a lot of sabotage and things like that. So there's like Baron there. So this screen here, this I looked at earlier, and this is possibly a little bit of a worry. I think the way the game works is you can see you have these different outlines around the tiles, like this one goes around here and up there, and you have this blue one, I think it's blue, around that. Now this is the one mechanic that I kind of didn't want to see come back from Northgard, but it looks like it is. And the idea here is that you start with your main base and you expand out into the land around you, and you take control of the land around you. Now, depending on how they do this, in Northgard it's done via food for the most part. You have food, you use said food to take control, and that's how you do it. In this, I'm hoping it's through different means, because I don't like the idea that I can't just, I have to... It slows the game down, for sure. It does slow the game down. But if I'm going to be taking control of land, I want it to be done with, like, either politically, or I want to do it with, like, forcefully. I don't want to sit there and then buy land. That's kind of weird. Doesn't really work in lore, but we'll see. And there's a big picture of Mr. Vladimir Harkonnen in his big suit. I'm not entirely sure what this screen is, but I assume it shows you, like, what your oh, it looks like trade or something. I'm not sure what it is, but yeah. Let's close off that. Let's see if anything else on this website. There's a behind-the-scenes thing here. This is them going on about the iconic characters and playing as different factions and the sandworm. Didn't see much of the sandworms in that. I might have been being a bit blind. You can choose between subterfuge, political influence, economic supremacy, or open warfare to prevail and gain control over the most important planet in the universe. So the open warfare thing is going to be what I'm most interested in. I think subterfuge, political influence, and economic, that all makes sense in the scheme of things. But if the warfare is anything like Northgard, this game is going to be... I don't want to say suck. It is going to be less fun to play in a multiplayer setting. And then we've got the... Well, I'll come on to that. And then we've got Dune, explore Dune with the ornithopters to discover... So they're using ornithopters as scouts? There's resource villages with points of interest. Expand with your troops to take control of more regions. Exploit the resources through buildings and spice harvests to dominate the economy. Exterminate your enemies with a strong military, but be aware of outright aggression. That is interesting. I don't know how I feel about that. Ornithopters being used as scouts, that's not really what I want to see them used as, but hey. And they go through early access and whatnot. Now, I have specific, like things I want this game to be. But before we do that, let's look at the they posted this on, what was the date? Oh, it was on in fact, January 14th, so it's a little while ago. And they're just answering frequently asked questions. I don't need to go through all of this, but basically, because I've read some of it, they're saying it's both an RTS and a 4X. It's like, the game is real time, but pace is slower than your typical RTS, and you can pause and fast forward. The game also features exploration, territory control, economic growth, combat, politics, and spying. So all of this sounds great. In theory, it sounds really great. Features to make a 4X, but not to detract from the core RTS experience people would expect from it. So that's the thing, right? If this is a real-time game, I don't mind it being necessarily slower, but it just, we just have to see. Has this game been reused, recycled from Northgard or any other titles? Vikings are well known for their very bad water discipline, so no. All aspects of Dune Spice Wars have been developed from the ground up specifically for the game. As much as that might be true, your UI looks very similar. And having played Northgard and the fact that you've got all these political, your gold, water, political intrigue, all this stuff along the top, it works the same. So that feels like a bit of a lie. If it means like the assets, then no. But the mechanics, there's definitely similarities there for sure. which houses will be playable. We've seen here we've got House Atreides, House Harkonnen. I'm assuming that Fremen are going to be one of them, and I'm not sure who the other one is, but there'll apparently be 5. There'll be a 5th faction during Access and having more. Why a house doesn't matter because that's the colour. And then this is what makes me hopeful. Will houses from classic Dune games make their way to the game? House Ordos. House Ordos was first mentioned in the Dune Encyclopedia and then in the video game Dune 2, but never in Frank Herbert's works. Starting with the books, and we'll see what would be best beyond early access. Now, we will... Oh, similarities about Northgard. I'll get to that in a sec. We will say this, right? In Northgard specifically, they have added in a lot of DLC clans. So, I would like to think that they will add in Ordos at some point, even if that is the fan favourite thing. That would be really, really cool. As much as I'm glad that they're sticking to like the main core of the books, Ordos is a huge part of the games, and I think they really do need to be in the game, specifically for that reason. So what similarities does this game have with Northgard? Both games are real-time games with slower pace. Beyond the games are quite different. Dune is a much bigger scale, featuring politics, trading, covert ops, and deeper resource management. That does not sound good to me. Deeper resource management? Oh no, I don't want this game to be overly complex. It already is a lot more complex than other Dune games, but like, Dune is about controlling the planet Arrakis. Now, the cool thing is, yes, you can do that from economic and spying, but the combat needs to be engaging. And if you're limiting to like Northgard only has like 3 fighting units to start with, like standard. Everything else is kind of got through special means. You can't really do that with Dune. Like, Dune is known for having these interesting units and very different units. And if the combat in this game is the weakest part, then unfortunately this is a game that I probably won't stick with that long. Because I would like to play it multiplayer, but we shall see. But it says both games bigger. Dune game length is also 2 to 3 times longer than Northgard. Oh, this could be changed at the point. I don't think it needs to be. Have you taken any inspiration from the previous Dune games? Played all the Dune video games, Dune and Dune 2 especially, and all the board games as well. So some influence. Very much his own game, unique take on it. Procedurally generated, blah blah blah. So this is going to have a lot of things like Northgard. They are using... Why they said they're not using a lot of the mechanics, like if that meant ground up, fair enough, but they are going to be using a lot of the stuff that they felt that worked. And then cartoonish, bold art style. Well, obviously because you're looking at a lot of sand. Let's have a look at. There will be the campaign will not be present in the initial launch, but like multiplayer is planned to come game soon during early access. DLC will probably happen at some point. Yeah. So that's the main thing. Now I think these Shiro games, right? I do think let's find something nice to look at. This ornithopter flying. I do think these guys will make a good game. Oh, okay, so the ornithopter uncovers the sand. Alright. I do think these guys will make a good Dune game. My issue is there are mechanics of Northgard which it looks like going to be similar, but maybe aren't what I would like to see in this Dune game. Now, Northgard itself is a interesting idea. I respect the fact that those guys did something very interesting with it. Like, single player wise, is actually quite fun. Very balance heavy game of getting all the right buildings and the right things and this and that. However, I have to agree that the multiplayer, we've tried to play the multiplayer a couple of times, or once I think. I've played it a few times, sorry. And combat in the game is kind of a bit sucky. And Dune being an RTS game originally and having those options to like micro and stuff, Northgard doesn't really have that. It has very, very basic combat in the sense that you kind of run into an area, you can singular micro a unit, go back into your own home and heal. And I hope that they've realised that, you know, the healing is probably a bit of an issue. But also combat mechanics are pretty non-existent. As a single player or a co-op game, I think there's some fun thing. I think it works fairly well. But yeah, combat kind of sucks in Northgard, and the fact that they're taking in a lot of the resource management to their game as well also is kind of has me worried, let's say. All in all, I do think they will make eventually a very solid Dune game, but I do think that there's potential for this game to be a good single player, but if the multiplayer isn't balanced correctly, then I think you're going to see a game that unfortunately is going to be quite disappointing for people that want to play the game multiplayer, assuming they don't fix combat and they make it very resource heavy. Making the game 2 to 3 times longer than the average Northgard game also, like, I get what they're going for, but you know, it's about that conflict going on. If you're going to take it from the books, it's much later on in the books where it's less about the fighting, but we shall see. Like, I am optimistically cautious about it. Sorry, cautiously optimistic. I'll get that right way around. But we shall see. I want this game to desperately be good. I am going to be looking at the early accesses to hopefully get an idea of what the game will be like. But yeah, I just want to put this out here. I'm a huge fan of the Dune games. I love the book. And I just want this to be good. But I have my doubts in certain areas because of the fact that there are issues with Northgard, and obviously this is based on some of the same mechanics. So we shall see. Alright, that's going to do it for me today then, guys. Thank you very much for watching, as always. If you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, then hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description, as always. And until next video, I will see you then.